Hi. Today let's talk about one event, a scroll event. Calling functions on events can be a very useful thing, but some events will run multiple times in 1 second, and we don't want to call function every time it runs because first we don't need it, and second it will hurt the performance of our page. So what can we do in when we find ourselves in that scenario that there is one event that is running multiple times in 1 second, and we only need to call a function only few times or only once. um, let's start with that. Let's create our HTML elements. Start with the header uh, and say something like agreement. So we will assume that we want someone uh, to read text, and then at the end of the text, we want that person to agree or disagree. But people don't like to read, so they'll just scroll down and say, I agree or I don't agree. But we want to trick them into reading. Uh, how can we do that? So there is a number of ways you can do it, but in our case, we will use that scenario as an excuse to use scroll events so that we can practice whatever we want to do uh, with scroll events. Okay? So let's assume that this is our div that we want to scroll. Let's call it a scrolling div. Okay, and then we will have our text inside that div, and then we'll have our agreement button in the other div, like agreement form or anything. Let's call this agreement form, and then in our form we'll say something like input type equals radio, value equals yes. So we assume that in our case, in this case, someone actually said yes, and in this case someone said no. And then here we can say like I agree and I don't agree. And then here we'll put a button. uh, let's say put type submit, and then we'll say submit. Okay. Yeah, so in here where we want our text, we'll just say id equals our text, and then copy um, this kind of huge text here, and then so if someone scroll down, they will find our agreement there. Let's make it look a little bit nicer. Mm, so we have our agreement form here. We want to put it a little bit below. So we will use CSS and um, so what we can do with this form is like put it a little bit um, below from this text. So what properties we'll use on that? We will use padding. So we'll say like padding 20 px. Okay, so we have, but we want this whole div, the scrolling div, to be actually scrolling, because this one we are scrolling is the whole page. Even the agreement is being scrolled. We don't want that in our scenario. We want only the scrolling div to scroll. So how you scroll how you scroll it? First, make sure that its height is kind of shorter than the text. So we'll put like height. Sorry about that. Height is, let's say, 150 30, and then so you know that if you put height is like that, and then the overflow property is the one that will tell us whether uh, to cut the text or to scroll or to do something else. So in our case, we'll just say scroll. So that thing will scroll. So you can see that there is a scroll bar here. Then we can scroll down and then agree and submit. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So what we can do in this case is we have seen that submitting it is not a good idea. Okay. So let's call this type button so that it does not submit the form. Great. So the button will not submit the form. Okay. Um, so, but here you can see that there is a possibility someone will just come here and scroll down without even reading it and jump it. So that's not something we want. We want to make sure that this person is actually reading it. But how can we do it? Okay, how can I do it? I'll suggest that we keep the reader in that page for some amount of time that we think it's reasonable for a user to read that text, and then we can allow them to submit. How do we do that? That's where our scroll event might be useful. Let's say that we know that how many times we can scroll this depending on the screen. We can see that maybe we can scroll 3 times, and every time how much time I can use to read this single scroll, like one whole screen, how much time can I use to read that? I can say that maybe, let's say, 4 seconds. So if I want to if I want to scroll like 4 times before I finish reading, then I'll have to make sure that the user is allowed to scroll um, one time in every 4 seconds and not anything else. That way I'll make sure that user have at least 12 seconds in the page, I mean in my text, and then probably they've read it. I mean, well, it's their choice. They can just stare, or nobody will tell them how am I deciding whether they've read or not. So it's up to them. Let's go with that. So instead of showing this form here, I will show something else. I will show a message. Okay, so let's put the message here just above the agreement form, and then this message will say like, please read the text before submitting. So I would like that message to be like a different color, say red. So I would say color red. And then I will want that also to have the padding. Okay. So I want to control when this one is shown and when this one is shown. So one of them can be shown, but not both of them. So by default, I want the message to be shown, and I want to show the form when I'm satisfied that the user has probably read my text. So let's start with my message div. So my message div will come like document so I'll get this in a variable so that I'll be able to control it when I want to hide or I want to show it. And then I will also have my agreement form, and this one also will be there. So to begin with, I want my agreement form to be hidden. So how do I do that? Just say this dot style dot display equals none. That way, this thing is the same as saying display equals none. It's the same thing, but I want to control it with JavaScript. So by default, you'll see that okay, what did not happen? Oh, I have an error. Get element by ID. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, get element by ID. And it's agreement form, not okay. Oh, still not working. Agreement form. Yeah, it's gone. Okay. So that's the first step, that if I come here and just scroll down, you'll see that our form is not there. How do we show our form? Let's first starting with handling the scroll event. So I want to show you that this scrolling event can be so much disturbing because it happens multiple times in 1 second. Let's put something like scroll count. Okay, this is scroll count here. I want this one also to have a little space. So I will add that into my CSS there. Let's make our life easy. This is where we are going to put our scroll count. So let's say our scroll count equals 0. Then let's create a function here that will handle scroll event. Let's say handle scroll. How do we handle scroll? In this scenario, I just want to add the count and then see how many events have occurred. So just say scroll count plus plus and then display that count in that element. I will do it like this. So we'll just say scroll count is scroll count. Okay, let's put a little space here like that. Okay, so this is how we do that thing. But before we run it, we want to make sure that this scroll event knows knows which function to call when it happens. How do we do that? Just come here and say document.getElement by ID, and then we will call that scrolling div. Sorry, that scrolling div, and say add event listener to that. Then we add a scroll event, and we say that when the scroll event happen, do this. That way, when this event happens, it will call this event. And then when it call this event, it will call this method. This method will just add the content to our scroll count. So you see the numbers there. Let's give this ID the red text too, so that it looks different. Just to call your attention. Okay, so you can see that there is so many events here, and I don't want to handle all of that. I just want to handle the few times that I need, because every number you're seeing here, it means that the function was called once. But if this function is huge, like it's doing so many things, it's manipulating so many DOM elements, then the um, the page will be overwhelmed with the number of times that the function is being called, and we don't want that to happen.